Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first day of class. My name's John Brady, but I typically go by JC. Contact information. This is my phone number. The best way to get a hold of me, however, is through email. And that is, you can always respond to my welcome email. So, any kind of issue with the class, you can always send me that email and we'll take it from there. So this is what we're going to go over today. Is just a basic course introduction and overview of the whole course. We're just going to go over a lot of things, what's coming up, what to look for throughout the mod. And then we're going to come back and focus on just the week one work a little bit more. And typically what I like to do is do a review on the first day and then go in and actually prepare the assignments and assessments, or a certain version of them, certain portion of them, so you know and understand what exactly it is that you need to do, what's expected. And I like to do that on day 2. So that would be tomorrow that we'd go over in more detail on the week 1 coursework. So let's go through and just kind of get a breakdown on really what we'll be talking about. Here we've got, this is the assignment page, so let me make sure we get the right page here. Let's first go over in the announcements. I mentioned in the welcome email that it's a good place to stop by every, beginning of each week and kind of check out the announcements and see what's going on. We regularly update those on Sunday and Monday for the most part, but they'll also have some continuous updates throughout the week. So it's a good place to kind of regularly check back on. And this, for example, is Christy Paulson. She is the class learning coach. I'll just kind of go over this really quick. This is her current schedule. This is one of those things that changes each week, but this is her schedule this week. So this is how to get a hold of her for any kind of assistance with the coursework. She can, look at your projects and go over things and give you advice and things like that. So that is her schedule. Keep in mind it changes every single week, and that's another one of those things that will be regularly updated in the announcements. All right, so let's go ahead and start going over the coursework. I won't go over my welcome email because that was everybody's probably got one in their email, and you can always check it out here in the announcements yourself. All of the recordings will also be in the announcements, so you can access those anytime you need to in the announcements section. All right, so let's start going through here, looking at kind of a week by week. We'll just start with week 1, and then we're going to come back to this and kind of go over it in more detail. So the first discussion, where and what is information design? I'm sure many of you have probably already heard of infographics and are aware of those, and we're going to be doing quite a few of those in the class, a number of them this week. So we'll be going over those. In this discussion, we're looking at, a link, actually 2 examples of infographics. You hear them called that, information design. 2 good examples of web information design. Infographics is kind of a short term that you'll hear, shorthand term that you'll hear often. Infographics is is what I'm talking about when we're talking about information design. In a lot of cases, I suppose not always, but in a lot of cases, those information graphics and infographics and information design will kind of be throwing those words around, and they'll kind of mean the same thing unless I distinguish, that there is a difference. And sometimes there might be. But for our purposes this week on the discussion, there's no real difference. infographics are kind of what we're looking at here. And here's one example, but you're supposed to provide on this two of your own examples that you just link to. And then you'll answer these questions. Why do you think these are good examples of information design? Why are they effective or not at their primary goal? And how well do they work in the context in which you found them? Are they meant to be standalone pieces or complementary pieces? So it just kind of goes over this. Make sure that you answer all of the questions, all four here in your post, and make sure that you have two links. So that would be your main post. Number 4 here, I'll just read, if you were tasked with creating these pieces. And it's just asking, if you were to imagine as the designer having to create them, how would you have done them differently? And if you wouldn't have done anything different, explain why you'd keep them as they are, why you thought that they provided a good solution. So here we need for the initial post, it says 250 words and needs to add to the conversation in some way. Challenge it, expand it, deepen it. Basically what we're looking for in your main post. So there, you're also looking at 2 response posts that are about 50 words, a little over 50 words. They say minimum 50 words. So you're looking at 2 of those, and as well as your main post in the discussion to get to be eligible for full credit. You'll need those things. And I'm not going to count words, but I'm going to roughly look at is this well developed? Is this about the right amount? If it's a little less than 250 words, that's okay with me. I'm not going to be a stickler for word count, but we're looking for pretty well developed main post, and also even your follow-up answers, instead of just something that says right on or thumbs up or that was awesome. Say why it was awesome. Say why you liked it. Add a few more sentences. I like to typically say at least 3 sentences on those follow-up posts that kind of indicate the hows and whys, and that's always good to think about. If you're struggling for more content to come up with, think about how and why this applies. Or your answer, if you thought somebody else's post was awesome, how was it awesome? Why is it awesome? Give us some more explanation on that. Hopefully thinking about that, the hows and whys will make that a little bit easier. 3 sentences is all I'm looking for on your follow-up post. You can obviously do more than that, but 3 is about roughly 50 words, somewhere in there. And again, I'm not counting words, but I'm kind of looking at, is this about the right amount? Is this adding to the conversation? Is it well developed? Those kind of things. That's what I'm looking for full credit on the discussion. That pretty much goes each and every week. Kind of a general rule of thumb is to always have at least one APA reference, unless I say that you don't have to have a reference this week. And in this case, you would want to provide a reference. So make sure to do that. That's another criteria on the discussion. Fairly easy. There's a lot of places you can get APA references. I think probably the most popular is the Son of Citation Machine or Citation Machine. You can just Google that. Either one of those will take you to the site that does the citations. You basically put in a website or you enter in a book, and it will spit out the citation in whatever format you want. Usually, for us, we're looking for APA format. You'll be able to choose different formats, but we want APA for the discussion. So you just need to have one of them. That's all you need, and it shouldn't be too difficult. You can also use Word. Some people like to use Word. I used to use Word, and I started using the citation machine a lot more often because students were telling me it was a lot easier and better, and I think that they're actually right. So I recommend citationmachine.net, so I believe the URL. But if you have any hard time finding that, you can always Google it. and just use that. It'll format it for you fairly easily. And if you want to use Word, that's also not a bad way to go either. But sometimes on that website, on the Citation Machine website, they'll already have it entered, and you just have to put in part of the reference, and it'll automatically populate the rest of the data in there, and it'll just you put the title and it knows everything else. So in that way, it can be a little bit easier, a little faster. So whatever's your preference, just make sure that you get at least one of those, and it'll go. That's all of these things. Well, I should probably say one more criteria that's going to be every week. I'll be looking for those things. So your full 250 word, give or take, main post, and then 2 follow-up posts that are roughly 50 words. You're looking for at least one APA reference, unless it's otherwise specified. We don't need it. And then also your first post by Wednesday. And that's something I don't always grade on, but I do sometimes grade on it. So make sure it's easy enough to get first post in there by Wednesday for most of you. So make sure to try to make that happen. And even if it's a not completely polished post, if you can get something there that resembles a first post by Wednesday, then you won't get the deduction if you don't have one until after then. So those basic things will go for every single discussion in the class. Things to keep in mind for throughout the rest of the class. You'll be running into those criteria for getting 100% on the discussion, and most people do pretty well, I think, on the discussion. I think some people are tempted to just do a first post, and they kind of sell themselves short a little bit, because it's not going to take you that long to write a couple paragraphs and responses to other students. You can even respond to one of my posts if you want, but it won't really take you all that long to do it. And the APA reference as well, it just it makes sense. If you want to get 100%, it's fairly easy to just do those little extra things. If it's just one single main post, it seems like you do a lot of work, put a lot of time and effort into it, and the most that you're going to get is 45 points out of 60. So, and that's if everything is perfect and you have the APA reference, 45 out of 60, that's how I grade it. So it's worth it to just have those few extra response posts, I think, and the post up, your first post by Wednesday, etc. So if you want to do good on the discussion, just all of them, just keep those basic things in mind. All right, I got some tree cutting going on outside the window here, so hopefully that's not ruining the audio, but they're chopping some trees down outside. All right, any questions on the discussion or kind of the basics of the class? Anything that you want to ask so far before we move on and start talking about assessment 1 and the rest of the course? We've got, 3 people in class today. Okay, no questions at this point. Okay, thanks. So moving on to assessment 1, the impact of visual choices. We're going to come back to this and the assignment. I think we covered the discussion pretty well, but we'll come back to assessment 1 and assignment 1. Do a little bit more detail on this. Mostly, I would say after the break. So, we'll do that 10-minute break and then come back and kind of go over this a little bit more. I'll show you some projects that other students have put together in the past, and we'll talk about both these a little bit more. But I just want to touch on, for now, an overview and kind of what's going on with all of these. So you're going to be putting together an infographic here. There's several criteria. These bullet points are always important. This more requirements here. 1 page provide. So as I say, we're going to take a look at an example of this later, but you're going to do a basic 1-page infographic where you're going to be kind of tackling this topic of love and how this couple met. And pretty straightforward. Like I say, I'm going to do a more detailed presentation of it tomorrow. And also, we're going to look at a little bit more today, and we'll even look at how some students have put these together. So I won't spend a whole lot of time on this right now, but we'll come back to it. Just going to move on with what's ahead, what's going on with the rest of the class. So here you're going to take statistical information for internet usage, and you're going to put this together on an internet usage chart. So here we've got data. I'll just click this and it will download here. Just a Word doc, so it'll open here. So this is the information that we're given. And what we want to do is present this in a little bit more of an interesting way, figure out ways that we can kind of capture an audience's attention with this kind of boring graphical data, and start thinking about maybe what you could do to spruce up this information and make it a little bit more interesting, a little bit more presentational, a little bit more easy to digest as far as when people are looking at this. First off, you want to figure out what you want to say, what you think is the most important thing to say out of all this data. You want to use all of this, including the notes down here, all this information you'll have to include. And, you may not want to put it in a table in columns like this. We're going to take a look at, again, this project from the point of view of, what some other students interpreted and what they thought would be a good way to go on this. So World Internet Usage and Population Statistics, June 30th, 2012. So that's our date. But you can see these different areas. How might this be represented? A lot of times maybe having a map that shows the different continents here. And maybe having icons that go next to the numbers, maybe computers or users, things like that we can add to this and present it in a much more interesting way. So that's the chart you'll want to download and start with right here. And what you'll put together. Again, we're going to take a look at this later as we look at this a little bit more in detail today, and then tomorrow I'm going to actually go over an example of putting it together, how I would do it. So you'll, by the time, if you watch both sessions, then you'll have a pretty good idea of how to put this together. So anyways, hopefully that's pretty straightforward so far. Any questions on week 1? Like I say, we'll be back to this. We'll come back to it. It's 11 by 17, so it's a little bit larger piece. Submitted as a PDF. Most assignments will be submitted as a PDF in this class, but always check to make sure. They might vary a little bit here and there, but PDF is a pretty safe bet for most of the assignments. So, all right, no questions, so we'll move on to next week. Week 2 discussion. So there's a bunch, how do you determine what data to put in, what is excluded, and what are the ethical challenges, possible liability issues, and There's a bunch of reading in Shark and ProQuest on this topic. Find some guidelines or examples to back the guidelines that you come up with on your own. Let's figure out this as a class, or let's figure this out as a class. Imagine we're the committee for the American Associate of Information Designers tasked with guiding information designers how to do this. So what is our answer? So that is the discussion for next week. So we're kind of talking about information design and our approach to information design, and what are some of those main things that we'd consider. So that's discussion number 2. I know that's down the road, but it's good to get some idea, I think, to just look at the overall class and kind of gauge what's ahead and see what's expected. Let's see. So walking map, would be doing a poster for how one can exercise by walking inside Walmart. So this is going to be, I would recommend looking at this as a branded Walmart piece, and so that it looks like it goes in Walmart. So we're going to use their logo, and all of their assets will be here. You can download the folder here, and you'll be using them in a poster that would go on the floor in Walmart that kind of shows these routes of exercise in the store. So I don't know. It's that's the goal of the assignment, and it sounds kind of interesting. I think this is going to be a larger poster, 48 by 48 inches, and it would just kind of sit, next to the wherever it would go on the floor, like probably next to like a clothing rack or something like that. It would map out a guideline for how you would exercise and what routes you would go. And maybe it's got something like advanced and expert and beginner, easiest. So some things like that you can think about that you could add to this piece as far as how you go about the walking, and you can make it fun. You can use things like the ski symbols. We had some people use those. Think about anything visual that's going to communicate a little bit faster than having to read everything. Icons are great. The ski symbols being the green circle, the blue square for intermediate, and then the black diamond for expert or advanced. You can come up with what you want. That's just an idea that I kind of liked. I remember a student had done that. So this is coming up next week. Once again, it's I think pretty straightforward. But remember, it is branded, so it's supposed to go in Walmart. It's supposed to have their logos on it, and you'll be downloading from this link here. So all of that content will be provided. Let's move on to assessment 2. So, that was the assignment 2. I actually went out of order. I usually like to do the assessment before the assignment. I'm going to skip that. All right, so here's a brochure design. This is also a brochure design for Walmart. It's supposed to be something that's placed on or near the sign so that customers can learn more about the initiative. It would have reasons for exercising. And, you could also use the map and kind of do a miniature version. I remember one student did that. Did kind of a miniature version of the map and actually worked it into the brochure. But there's a few different approaches that you can take. You can also do a simplified version of the map. But this is supposed to go along with that walking map, so the map that's anchored to the floor. And, this would go in like somewhere near that or actually on the map itself. And it would just kind of inform that piece a little bit. It would help explain a little bit more about the idea behind it. So that is, it's going to have 6 different parts, 6 different sections, and even an opportunity for extra credit, looks like here. So again, here is where you want to get the text, and you'd also want to use those graphics from this download here, the week 2 assignment. So this will have the logo and some other things. So that is, those are kind of tied together, the assignment and assessment for week 2. So it's 80 points, worth 80 points, which is, standard is 50 points on the assessments. This one for week 2 is worth a little bit more. And it's a little bit more involved, so that makes sense. So anyhow, that's that. And let's go on to week 3. Here's the discussion. So it is important to accept we don't have all the right answers. In my view, the information designer is a facilitator. The key is to ask the right questions, observe, and process the cues. Quote by Gordon Aquera. Please explain in your own words what this statement means and how, or what it means to you and how you will consider this idea moving forward. So the idea of the information designer as a facilitator, transferring information to the reader. The key is to ask the right questions, to observe, and to process the cues. So you're going to be writing on the specific quote. It doesn't seem like a whole lot to write 250 words on, but you'd be surprised. I think you could come up with quite a bit, actually, because it's it really does kind of challenge you to kind of think about, well, what is your real role as a information designer? It's not necessarily to make things look pretty or to, that might be an objective on some projects, but it might not be so much as to inform viewers and inform people that might be interested on all kinds of various things. So something to think about for the discussion. I would consider, doing some Googling and research, and you can use Shark, you can use, it's okay to use Google, within reason, use your best judgment as far as the websites are concerned in this class and the websites that you're using as a reference. Even those domain names, you want to make sure that what you're referencing sounds professional and comes across professional. So things like that, I think that's pretty common sense for most students. So. Moving on to assignment 3. So this is family history. You're going to go 4 levels on this: yourself, your parents, your grandparents, and your great-grandparents. This is one example. You don't have to do it this way. You can do it maybe on the more standard family tree. But these are a couple of suggestions for you. If you wanted to do kind of I guess this would be the spiral format, you could do something like that. Or if you wanted to do this more traditional format here, you could do this. There's a few other structures that could work for a family tree. Really, I think this is probably the most popular one, the most well-known. And a lot of times it's best to just go with what is well-known, unless you have a really good reason, really good idea to go outside of that, because it kind of relates to what the discussion is talking about in terms of, what are you really trying to do? You're not really trying to be fancy and creative so much in information design, but you're trying to present information in a way that's more digestible, more readable, more understandable. You're trying to communicate. So things to keep in mind. If you want to use a traditional structure for the family tree, that's great. I think that's a good way to go. If you want to use something different, that's fine too. But just make sure that you have a good reason for that. And this is to me, it kind of works as a family tree. I don't think it's as good though as what I'm used to seeing. At least it doesn't read as fast. This is it's kind of more, I guess, attractive with the colors, I think. But here you've got actual faces and photos. And that usually a question, do you need the actual photos? And you won't need the actual photos for your family tree in this case. But if you wanted to, you could. This is just one example that doesn't have the photos. This is an example that does have the photos. Sometimes people do. I've had students that get really into this and they get all of their photos. I've had students also even do kind of these versions and illustrations on these. But you can make them kind of iconic. So you make a standard boy and a girl, and then you adjust the hair and maybe put some accessories on that person, then you can make them kind of iconic. So that's another way that you could go about this. Just man, woman. You could add age to it or not. It doesn't really matter. It depends on what you're going for on this. So we've got extra things you can kind of look at as examples: Ancestry.com, newfamilysearch.org. So family tree, family history for assignment 3 should be fun. Again, you don't need to have actual photos of your family for that. That's usually a common question that comes up. I've seen some pretty good ones that just use icons, like I mentioned, or this doesn't use anything, and I think it works pretty well. I think my favorite though would be this with the actual photos of people, but how realistic is that? Contacting whoever might have photos, like maybe it's your parents or maybe it's your aunt and uncle, or it's sometimes not easy to get photos of everybody that you need, so that's not a requirement. But it's kind of neat if you can get that. So it might be something you want to chase down or think about. If this is coming up in a couple of weeks, then you want to do that. Maybe even send it to some of your relatives who might be interested. That's always a good incentive, I think, to bring up for students who want to do a little bit more on this and actually chase down real photos. And it might look great for this project, but you might also have something that you could share with your family. So post it on Facebook or whatever. So anyway, just some ideas on what's to come. Don't really have much else to say about family history other than think about how we're presenting information. I tend to lean towards kind of the more family tree traditional structure on this, but it's not a requirement. You can go outside of that. All right, career integration. I don't know if I have to explain this a whole lot. Just this is the week 4 feedback for the class. I actually wanted that last because I wasn't going to talk much about it, but I guess I'll mention it now that I'm on it. What did you find the most value from the readings? You can include videos, and then you talk about why. Again, each one of these to get full credit needs to be roughly 3 sentences. So you're looking at the 50 words each thing. Again, like same as the amount that you would reply in the discussion, 50 words or so, 50 words give or take. We're looking for a paragraph, not just it was fine or I liked it, or things like that aren't going to get you the full points. And it is graded, you will get points on it. So something to keep in mind. Fairly easy to just write out a couple sentences and really it's worth 15 points. Each one of these is worth 5 points each. And so why not? We take this information and use it for the classes and use it to improve on those classes. So I want to hear from you as far as your opinion of the course. So what did you find most value from the instructor lectures and why? Number 3, what did you find the most value from the assignments in this course and why? Basically, keep that and why in mind. It's not just again, 1 or 2 word answer for these. So it even puts criteria down here. So if it says the assignment sucked, I didn't learn anything, you're not going to get any points for that. It's just warning it. And believe me, we do get answers like that sometimes. So, if you didn't like it and you present an argument as to what was wrong, then that's perfectly valid. But, be professional about it. Be thorough about it. Give those reasons why. And it's not about if you didn't like something, we want to know. That's honest. But, you don't want to say things like this as these examples are. So anyways, probably worth reading over a little bit, but we are expecting those 50-word answers for 1, 2, and 3 for the full points, which is 15 on the career integration quiz. All right, last but not least is the week 4 final assessment. So this would be a trade show booth. And this one's kind of fun. This one's going to involve designing some very large graphics that would go in a trade show. You can download the templates that you would use. So here it is. Use one of these images to mock up your booth. We can take a look at this one. So they offer you 2 of them, and you can just have a choice between what one you want to use, just one or the other. So there's one. So you're going to put actual graphics in here. Probably what you'll end up using is Photoshop to put things in here, but you could also use Illustrator, or probably Photoshop or Illustrator would be the best options in this case. And then here's your other one if you want. So there'd be 3 panels to consider on this one. So here, this panel, and then a panel here. Those 3. So it'd be mainly these 2, but the third one you want to keep in mind. So in this one, it'd be this panel, and this panel. So I bet many of you have seen or been to trade shows and are familiar with this. This would be, about 6 feet high or so, maybe a little shorter or taller, but at roughly 6 feet, give or take. And it just extends up, usually as a backdrop to a set that people might have in here. They're selling stuff, or they've got a couch or a lounge area, salesmen, brochures, all kinds of things. But this would be kind of a backdrop going on that would kind of sell your product a little bit, and either have a big image of the graphic, or usually it's got image, logo, maybe tagline, things like that, things of that nature that will kind of complement the booth and the rest that's going on at that trade show. So you've got a choice on what you want to do between these 2. And I don't know, I think you just want to choose whatever you're interested in. But you can choose one or the other. And it seems to me like a pretty fun class, a lot of different projects going on. A lot of kind of unique challenges. And I think, it's just overall, it's kind of a fun class. It's kind of a unique class, doing a lot of different things, different projects in this class, and different shapes and sizes and whatnot. So that is pretty much the whole course, just a basic overview. Here we have some examples of, these are not exactly the same, but this would be an example of mock-ups design. Kind of what you'd see in the background. So that provides one example. I know that's not quite in the same format, but you get the idea. It's really just big graphics. We got kind of a little bit of advertising going on. It looks like something that's going to be at the trade show. All right, so that we kind of finished up a little faster than I had anticipated, which is good. But I should ask before moving on, do you have any questions at this point about the whole course, about week 4, 3, 2, 1, anything come up at this point that you're thinking about, concerned about? Family tree one. Are you worried about that one? Oh yeah. A huge family. Well, that's a challenge. I think, you could also um, make it up. I think, that's I think if you wanted to do a standard kind of, I guess you call it the nuclear family, um, you could do something like that. I'm not going to check and make sure that, these are the real people in your family. So I know I've had plenty of people make things up before. I think if you're up to it, though, go ahead and do it. I think that challenges things when you do have seven. And, me, for example, I have one brother, um, or, maybe I don't come from that large of a family, so this would be an easy project. And it's no fair to be at that much of an advantage unless you want to try to tackle that, unless that seems to be your thing. That's something that you want to do. Then by all means, go ahead and do that. But uh, if you just want to kind of show the presentation of the family and how you would present that with uh, kind of as an infographic. If you wanted to use icons, you wouldn't have to use actual pictures. Like, yeah, you wouldn't have to. Um, but I think really a family tree. I'd like to see pictures. But you don't have to do that. I think the challenge of getting your whole family together, and then it'd be a challenge for me. I don't think I could nail that down in the next 2 weeks and get pictures of everybody. There'd be missing, definitely be missing spaces, I think. But if you want to try to tackle that challenge, then it's up to you. I wouldn't stress about it too much. Like I said, if you wanted to simplify that, just pretend that you had a very basic family, and if you wanted to make up the names, I'm fine with that. I think we're looking more at presentation than anything else, and it's kind of unfair if some people have these huge families and have these huge challenges, while others have small families and could put this together fairly easily. So I kind of want to make it fair for everyone. If you just want to do a really basic family and basic outline, and just as you go up the chain, there's only two rather than seven, or there's only one rather than seven. It's not like I'm going to check up on that. I'm looking more at the presentation and how you put it together, that sort of thing. So whether or not you want to make it authentic is up to you. I think it can be more fun if you make it authentic, but it can also be a huge headache. So you would just have to decide, is that realistic? Can you actually get these people's photos? And maybe you don't want to use their photos, which is also fine. But I think that's one of those things that's coming up, that if you do want to do a big project like that, make sure that you consider it now and you know about it now, and instead of having it derail you when it comes up and it's like you're trying to chase down all week people's photos because that's what you want to do. If you want to get photographs, start chasing them down now. But like I said, that's completely up to you. It's your call. Certainly don't want to talk you out of it if that's what you want to do, but probably a good idea to start going after those like this week if you want to get photos of everybody. So yeah, great grandparents. Yeah, they would be tough to. Okay, I don't even know how I get my great grandparents, and yeah, I mean, like I say, it's you don't have to go that far, but if you can, that would be kind of fun. Yeah, to start yesterday, absolutely. Sooner the better. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about the family tree too much. There are ways that you can kind of work around it, but if you do want that real thing that you want to share on Facebook and impress your relatives, then start thinking about it now. Definitely don't wait till week 3 and suddenly don't have time to put it all together. Know how that can go. So anyhow, let's see. So I think why don't we take a break now, and actually let's get started. At least look at some examples on here, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll come back and work on this a little bit more. So usually I like to do the breaks an hour into it, but it's not necessarily. You can jump around a little bit on that. So this is a student project on this particular one. A lot smaller. I kind of like this one. She's kind of creative here. What I love about you: consideration, cooperation, cooking, creativity, devotion, dedication, directness, festiveness, eyes, hair, intelligence, humor, loyalty, simplicity, sexiness. So we've got this whole the flower with all of these kind of losing petals, and she lists all these different traits here. And here is, let's go over this again. So you probably heard this quote before: the medium is the message. Graphic designers have far more power than we sometimes give ourselves credit for. While we recognize catchy marketing pieces and impress each other with our creativity, I believe I didn't write that. I hate when they write in the first person. So I believe we fail to see the power of our choices in shaping how the message is received. In other words, the text is only a part of the total message. I love you would be interpreted very differently depending on whether we visually presented it in a romantic setting, an ironic setting, or a violent setting, or some other choice. However, it isn't just the pictures and the colors that count. Typographic choices and even the location and means of production matter. The audience you reach and how they feel about your piece varies. If you put it on a billboard by the freeway, a luxury magazine, or handbills stapled to the telephone poles. You've almost certainly heard the phrase, "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways." It's from a poem by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. See the full sonnet here. There's a link. I won't take you to that, but you can check that out. We'll have a friend, Wally, who needs you to design a graphical piece. So you're going to create an infographic for him that shows how he counts the ways for his sweetheart, Marina. And here's the basic data. So they met roller skating. They're both currently 23 and met when they were 18. They both love pepperoni pizza and root beer. Mariana loves daisies. Wally wants at least 15 ways he loves Mariana on the graphic. So these are just some things, some suggestions. You don't necessarily have to have this, but they're just ideas that you can include. His example of pepperoni pizza and root beer, that's fine, but maybe you don't want to do that. She didn't do that here. She didn't reference that here, but she does have 15 ways referenced that he loves Marina. And she just spelled this out in the words. And, kind of did this graphical flower losing its petals idea, kind of that whole she loves me not concept is what she went with here. I thought it was good. I thought it turned out pretty well. But, these are just some suggestions. She didn't reference the pizza and root beer. They're both 23, but they met when they were 18. She could have referenced that, but she didn't. That's fine. They met roller skating. She didn't reference that. Marina loves daisies. Well, she did reference daisy flower. So, if you want to do something like that, we're just looking 15 different ways that, 15 examples of ways that he loves Marina. So you can get creative with it. You don't have to include everything. In fact, you probably don't want to if you want to keep it interesting. If you want to keep it clever or creative, then you're not going to want to include absolutely everything. But these are just some kind of examples that you might consider using. So here are the directions. Create a one-page infographic to help out Wally. Here are the requirements. One page only, and it should be a strong presentation taking up the full page. And it's just going to be on one side. I suppose you could do it on two sides. It doesn't bother me if you do that, if you choose to do it on two sides. But typically, we'll just be looking at the one side. And maybe you just do a color flood on the other side, or don't worry about two sides unless you really want to include that and design the other side. So I'm just mainly looking at the one side on this project. That's all that she did when she turned this in. So there aren't two sides to this. But it might fold up, and it might just be a green paper or something that you put a sticker on to close it. That's kind of the idea that she had here. It doesn't really have to be any specific size. You can get creative with the size, the format. Do you want it kind of that long horizontal? Do you want it more vertical? Do you want it maybe, hopefully do something a little bit more interesting than just a standard sheet of paper, because we're so used to that. It's so common. And this is, he's talking about how he loves her, and that's kind of a unique thing. You don't want to just use a standard piece of paper that you're used to seeing 8.5 by 11. It's kind of boring. So, these unique formats are good. Consider different sizes, different ratios, longer, taller. Maybe it's a square, a perfect square would work. But something different I would recommend than the 8.5 by 11. Get creative with that format, I'd recommend. So here you can also provide any citations that you take. I just prefer you not put the citations on the actual piece. Again, unless you can figure out a way that it doesn't detract from that piece, you can put them on the piece. If you want, you can just use them when you submit that content in the Dropbox. You can just put the citation in there. Yeah, you can just leave them in the comments section. That's fine. So that should be easy. And I think that you can also put it on your piece, but it does tend to take from it a little bit. I don't think I would like this as much if I had to see a bunch of references on here. Like maybe where she got these graphics and the flower. And I don't really think it would help it if you had a bunch of references, but you can definitely put it in the Dropbox area where you can just type a note. That should be fine. So here, I think I've gone over all of these but the last one. So remember, you have remember to have 3 or more graphic pieces representing different aspects of their romance. So 3 or more graphic pieces, but 18 ways. So they could be, we could, or 15 ways. We could talk about her project and maybe these little birds count. Maybe there's lovebirds or something. These as gold and ornamentation could count. What it's asking for is at least 3 graphics. So she has quite a few more than 3. But you don't want to clutter it up with too many things. I think this turned out good on hers. I could probably make that a little larger, see it better. So, printer's marks, they're optional. I don't think this was really needed. I do like to see the crop marks because that tells me where your trim line and bleed area is. So that's good if you have those, but I don't really care about the color bars and registration marks and all that stuff. If I don't see any print marks, that's okay. I guess I'll just say those are optional. I think that's what I'd recommend though, if you just the trim marks and bleed marks. Or just the trim marks is what she has on this one, which is fine. I can see from the trim marks where that bleed is going. So that's good. All right, so that is that. You'll be graded on creativity, effectiveness, originality, and ease of understanding. Look at examples of infographics on the web. It's always good to kind of look at some examples before you start on really any of these projects. See what other people have done. Get some inspiration. Get some kind of ideas for what you want to do. All right, so let's look at this last one, or the assignment. Now we're nearing the 3 o'clock mark, so maybe we'll just talk about this one for a second and then go on break and come back and finish this one up. But this one's a little bit of a challenge. You have to, this is quite a bit of information to kind of work with. It's not that it isn't doable, but it's definitely something that most of you will have to struggle over a little bit. I think there's going to be some thought put into this as how should I lay this out? What is the most important thing to present in this data? How do I want to show this in a way that's more user-friendly, more digestible in terms of the content? What visuals can I use? Do I want to use globes? Do I want to use computers? Do I want to use little symbols of people? All of those would be good examples of icons and graphics that you might use to help kind of aid in our understanding of this information. So that's pretty much, I think, where we'll end on this. We'll just, again, take a 10-minute break and pick this up in 10 minutes. Do you guys have any questions on this one? This is another thing you want to use for this project. You want to use everything, even the notes at the bottom. So we're providing you with all this information, but we just want to see it presented or represented in a way that's just more visually interesting, user-friendly. Kind of tell your story with visual graphics and think about ways you can do that. Is it the shapes of the continents? Is it maybe for internet users, do you want to do head and shoulders kind of icons? For How do you want to represent the internet? Do you want to? It's an optional thing. Many ways to kind of present this information. Do you want to use a web? Do you want to use kind of like these kind of wires with maybe electricity going through it or something, connecting users around the globe? Things to think about visually on this, and we'll come back and, like I say, go over this when we get back, but we'll take a look at some other student solutions as well. Would you have a legend? Question is, would you have a legend on the poster if you are using images for the numbers? So you could do that. You could use a legend, sure. Yeah, definitely. Similar to a map. And that would be one way to go about it. You wouldn't necessarily have to do that, but that you could use a legend, sure. I think it's a good idea. I think it does kind of help break things down a bit. So I think you're thinking in the right arena here with that for using a legend. So yeah. So we'll go over this again today, and also I'll go over it, put a version that I would do tomorrow. So some better examples coming up. So I think that's going to say a lot more than just kind of talking about it, but it is a good thing to maybe look over and maybe even think about, look it over maybe during the break, and let me know if you have any questions. We can kind of go through some of those when we come back. But anyhow, I'm trying to think, is there anything else I should mention here? It seems like I'm forgetting something. I got that feeling I'm not mentioning something. 11 by 17, so it's also larger, vertical or horizontal, whatever you want to do. The format on the assessment, I was saying you could do whatever you want, and consider some various formats that are maybe a little bit different. But on this one, the week 1 assignment, it gives you specifically 11 by 17 inches. And 72 DPI is fine for this. A lot of times you might want to make it 300 DPI if it's print, but not necessarily. 72 will be fine for this class, and it makes it a little bit easier to work with for both you and I, because it's easier for me to get those up on screen and to actually download them if I need to, if they're not giant. 11 by 17, it's 300 DPI. That's going to be pretty big. So you can just do it at 11 by 17. It's 72 DPI, and that'll be fine. So, as always, use the principles and rules of good design and typography, of course. So, I can't remember what it was. I wanted to mention something. It's not coming to me. So, why don't we just, at this point, we'll take a break and we'll come back and we'll kind of figure out whatever we need to when we get back. So this one, the question is, got a couple questions. All right, can we turn in a mock-up for the assessment? I'm not sure what you mean by mock-up. Okay. So make it into a card. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you could do a card. I think that's a good idea. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you could do something like that. Sure. Question is, can you do it with? Can you make something that's like a card, like the mock-up presentation? And so, yeah, you could do something like that, sure. So the other question is, so is this one in AI, Adobe Illustrator? I would recommend Adobe Illustrator for this one. That's your best bet, but really you could use any one that you want. I think I'm going to use Illustrator when I put it together tomorrow, but you really could use InDesign or even Photoshop if you wanted. That's just depending on your graphics. When you think about it, it just depends, like, why might you want to use Photoshop? Probably if there's a lot of photos, right? So if you're going to have a lot of detail and photos, and maybe you have some concept where you're using a lot of textures or something like that, well, Photoshop might be the better option to use. But yeah, I'm going to say when I do mine, I'm definitely going to use Illustrator. And I have a little bit more of a graphical idea in mind. It's a little bit less of a photo concept. So that's mainly what you're considering as far as like what the best program is to use. And I think a lot of times when they aren't listed here, it's because you could use really any of them, and they would, depending on your concept and what you want to do, different programs would be appropriate. Photoshop for photos, basically. I just like to say that. It makes it easy. Illustrator for illustration. And really InDesign for typography, but you could also use InDesign for a project like this where there's typography and there's some illustration. Really, those two are about the same in terms of, for this project anyways, about which one you'd want to use, for example. So anyhow, that's about it for now. I think let's do this 10-minute break. Break 10 minutes, and we'll see you after that.
Gotta come back in.
All right, we're back. Hope you had a good break. Let's make sure we can share the screen, see the screen. All right, we're going to continue where we left off talking about the internet usage poster week 1 assignment. This is the 11 by 17 poster. Let's look at a couple projects from previous students. Accidentally hit that. All right, here's one. So this was one take on this. So these either got all 100% or really close. Internet usage from 2000 to 2012. We've got big title at the top. We've got the continents in the background, North America, with the data here right underneath internet users, population online versus total percentage of world users. We've got the main data under each of these 7 continents here. And we've also kind of got a little bit of a key here. It's not really a key, but it's a side note where we kind of detail world internet users, 2.4 billion world population, 7 billion world percentage of online users, 34.3%. Growth since the year 2000, 533%. So this is looking at 2012. So this is quite a few years old. But 34.3% of the percentage of internet users online, 34.3%. So I like the way that they presented it in different areas like this, and it's certainly readable. It's more interesting than looking at that basic chart that we were looking at. Certainly, most people, hopefully everybody would agree, but you know how hard it is to please some people. This is a much more readable, more interesting, more graphic approach to this data. I guess it depends on what you're going for and what data you need, but really if you're trying to present this to a general population, people are just going to tune out. Nobody's going to want to read all this unless they find it really fascinating, really interesting, and they really want to key into those different numbers and look at the table that's here. And if our job is to present to kind of a general public, kind of bridge that gap and make it interesting to more people, I think this definitely does a better job of that. So this was one student's take on this. I think there are a few things that could use some improving. Feel free to chime in, anybody that wants to mention anything that they noticed. But this is you want this down here, this kind of extra verbiage, the legal stuff, or the just the details. I guess it's not legal, but it's just that extra kind of how the statistics were gathered and some of that informative things that you need to have on there. It's all this part. So you'd have to remember to include everything on there, including that. And this would be, this is kind of hard to read, for example. So you'd want to be able to read that. Yeah, so there's mention that the 2-part title is confusing. I agree. I think that is that could be a little bit more, brought together. I like this typeface here. I think if he, and this isn't bad, maybe if he stuck this underneath here, world internet usage, and he's changed some of this, which is fine. You can take some liberty with that. World internet users and population stats. I like the way that he retiled it personally. I think that's, you got to consider that you're trying to reach a market or a population that's a little bit less, maybe, semi-interested. Maybe they're kind of interested if you present it in a certain way, kind of thing. And I think this does, overall, it does a pretty good job of doing that. But yeah, you're right. I think the broken title is a little bit confusing. World over here, internet usage over here. They should be either grouped, so they're in more proximity, or maybe even get rid of the world here. You could just say internet usage around the world. I guess you could say world internet usage. So the world's kind of a good part of it, but you kind of get the gist of it anyways. If you just say internet usage, it's kind of, you could go either way on it. I think you could take it out, or you could leave that world in. But it's okay to simplify. You can simplify the data just so long as it makes sense. And he's done a lot of that here. Yeah, world is kind of implied. I think so too. You see all the continents here, and it's like, well, yeah. So yeah, I don't think that we necessarily need that. I like the font that he used for world. Needs to kern the W and the O a little closer together, but I do like the font that he used. Yeah, didn't think Mars. Yeah, it's, I think with a lot of it's just simplifying the information. So you do kind of just put out the really need to know basics. In most cases, I think in this case, there's a good argument for that. And you're constantly, in many cases, you're constantly thinking, well, how can this be simplified so that it will reach a broader audience, and so that the average person will be interested and want to stop and read this poster. Not too many people are going to want to stop and read this thing. Unless, like I say, they're really unless this information is really interesting to them, is really geared to them somehow. So I thought this was pretty well done. I think here we could kind of maybe not have so much space between, so the leading between each of these is too much. Maybe instead of making this a tangent on the globe, this area here, it could be maybe smaller, something like this. And you could fit all of these in here. It's like this. So design-wise, tangents that come right off the edge are usually something you want to avoid. In this case. So if it was smaller, and then took out some leading on this, and that's just a presentational thing. But overall, I think the fonts are well chosen. One thing I do notice is this is the only place that he has the sans serif font. Is this right here, and it's also bumping into the G. So this did lose a few points here and there for just some problems, like I mentioned. But he did get an A on this project, so it's he did do well on it. The world font reminds you of National Geographic. Yeah, it does. Maybe that's why I kind of like it. I always think of National Geographic as kind of a world, international magazine. Like the blue and yellow, simple color scheme. Looks good. Blue, yellow, and white. It's almost like this down here could be in white, but it would be a little bit strong. I think it's just a little too hard to read right now. But I like pretty much everything else other than, like, he should have maybe used this typeface a little bit more than just right here. And down here is the only place that he used the sans serif typeface. Maybe other places, maybe like in here. Maybe on, to distinguish these lines, because instead of using the all caps, that works. What he did here, that's fine. But he could have used this one a little bit more instead of all the same serif. But, I think this is kind of good that he spells out, makes it easier for us to read that by making this all caps. So we can kind of look at things at a glance, kind of skim through this and look at these things a little bit easier, because, if this is two things that we're typically comparing, it's good that he did it the same. These, on all of these, if you want to look through it kind of quickly and glance at everything, it's good that he kind of chose to do that in his presentation, I think. Anything that you can do to make things a little bit more scannable, it's usually a good choice that just makes it a little easier on the viewer to kind of, well, they call it legibility. So it's a little bit more legible, scannable. You can look at that fast and pull information from it just by grouping these two things, treating them the same. We can see this easier in all of them. We can pick out that data really fast in all of these. So that's a good thing that he's doing here that's helping us to interpret this. All right, I think that's about it on this one. I think this one was done pretty well. Any other comments on this one? Let's take a look at another one. So this one's good. It's a little bit busy, but they did get all the information on there. We've got quite a few different things going for it. We've got, well, I really do like the font they chose. The typeface is, you'll hear me sometimes use font and typeface interchangeably. Font is the software, so when I say that, people just say font as kind of a slang term in graphic design a lot. Everybody kind of calls it a font, but really the way I should technically refer to it as a typeface. So I like this typeface that was used rather than I like the font that was used, because the font, you're talking about software, but I'm not a stickler on that. I interchange those two words all the time. So it's just kind of like, you'll hear that happen, and I'll just, you can, I don't usually go by that rule too much. So font, typeface, they're more or less the same. So comment, even though it is busy, the alignment makes it easy to follow. Yeah, I think so. Good point. There is an improvement that I can see on the alignment. So if this here, Africa, and this was bumped along the left edge, that would make it even more readable. Since this is a centered title and this is centered, and this is a left aligned, what you don't usually want to mix your alignments like that. I mean, is it horrible here? It's not really that bad, but it kind of works. But I think it could be just a little bit better if this, for example, was over here and it was all left aligned. And, maybe you want to, this might be fine if it's centered, if it's the last thing. But also, what does it look like if you just put this right over here and put growth and just wrote it out on one line? I mean, that might actually make it even less busy looking. I'd have to see that. I think they did a good job overall. I do like what they put together. And I like their graph. I like the way that they kind of, gave us some bar codes here for the growth. And it's pretty readable. It's pretty scannable. It wasn't, they did colors for the numbers, so we can pick out those numbers a little bit easier. So that's helpful. Other things, I'm trying to think, what could they have done? We're not seeing what we did on the last one, how we had those groups in all caps versus lowercase, and how we grouped those on the last one. I like, though, that they use a lot of icons. That's kind of neat. It's a little bit repetitive, but when you look at contrast, repetition, alignment, proximity are 4 key design elements that we're working with. You can certainly go too far on any of those, and there's a balance to be achieved on any of those. But maybe they're pushing the balance a little bit. So with some of the icons, because they're getting a little bit repetitive. And so you look at things. Well, what could you do to make it less repetitive? If you change these characters here, for example, like the 3 people, if they changed, 78% look different than 27%, and you kind of maybe simplified them that way. That might be one thing you could do. I'm just throwing that out there as one other option, so that you're not repeating the exact icon every single time. So here, count it 7 times. It's starting to get a little bit tiresome. Computer, it's great a few times, but after 7, it's kind of, you're pushing the boundary of what's reasonable repetition at a certain point. You want some of it, but when things get to that point, you tend to want to say, well, what else could I do, or what's something that's different that I could do to these, so that maybe the percentage here, maybe I use transparency or something. And that's just another idea I'm throwing out there. I don't know if that's going to be a great solution in itself. But, maybe, some of these growth rates, you don't stop on 100%. So they're going all the way up to 3,606% growth rate. So how might we represent that? Well, maybe we don't want to represent the growth rate with a computer. Maybe we want to, put this next to maybe internet users, or maybe even the continent, the country, not the country, the continent. So maybe we want to, instead of representing that here, maybe this icon could work better here, because when I usually see percentages, I kind of expect like this, and this was a good thing that they did here with the percentages. So we're looking at kind of a percentage, like more is, the longer bar graph represents more, 3,607%. But here it's like, it almost feels like a weird place to use an icon. It's almost like they use it just because it was at the end. So that it's a nice little visually, it anchors this little piece of information here. So it's nice that way, but is it necessarily really adding to the piece as much as it could be with, these different percentages? If I see percentage, I like to see that percentage represented usually. And this computer's not really doing much to aid this text that it's next to. So maybe this isn't the best choice of where to place this. But really, any kind of graphic placed next to something can make the piece a little bit more user-friendly and make people look at this. So even if it's not maybe necessarily directly tied to it, there's still kind of an argument as to why you might want to put an icon there if you want to kind of emphasize this 841.9% growth. If you want to represent and emphasize that last line and that growth, and you want to kind of use that icon to say that, then that would be one good reason to use an icon here, even though it doesn't literally tie to the percentage or the growth necessarily. So it's, there's things that you can do that, graphic design does not have to be literal all the time. I think this works, but I think it could be a little bit better. I think that icon could be used in a little bit better way. I think I gave her credit for doing this and didn't dock points because it wasn't used as well as it could have been, but I believe I did mention that on her feedback. So there's just a number of things that are just, they could use a little bit of improvement, but there's also a number of things that I think work really well with this. And I even like the lighter background that's even suggestive on the other piece you saw. He placed those over the continents, and I like that as well. But this person did it a little bit different. He didn't necessarily. We can look at the other one. So he placed all of these in the general vicinity of where the continents are, which I think is kind of nice. But he didn't have to do that. This one doesn't do this, and it's still readable. We're just looking at those continents. The world is kind of a backdrop. It's got kind of this nice gray tone to it. And we've got some nice color that really pops and really comes forward on the top of that. So overall, I think they did a good job on this one. This little area here, again, that we're calling attention to, the world population, internet users, 2000, 2012, all the basics are here. Maybe some of these would be a good place for some icons, or, as was brought up earlier, some sort of legend. So hopefully, this will give you some ideas, and what I put together will give you some ideas as well. But, there's always something that I try to discourage students from copying exactly what I do or what another project does, just because I don't think you learn that much just copying. I think that has its place, and you can learn from that, but it's a lot better if you put it together from scratch on your own, really think all this stuff out, and try to come up with solutions, because that's really what it's all about, is providing those solutions when the time comes. Kind of thinking on your feet a little bit, and thinking while you're sitting down a little bit too. But it's, I guess if you're doing graphic design, then you're going to be always sitting down. But you're going to be kind of thinking up solutions at the last minute. And that's, for this project, you're going to want to kind of think through it and figure out what's most important. How do you want to present this data? What's going to be most interesting to people? And again, you're presenting it like it's the average Joe. It's the average person. It's the person that's not interested in this. It's like this is going to, if this was sitting on the wall at the trade show or something, that, maybe it's an internet booth or something, they're selling internet service of some sort. They've got this on the wall. Everybody's going to be walking past this. Nobody's going to be stopping to look at this data. It's 1 out of 100 are going to stop, probably, something like that. Whereas if you're looking at this, it's going to be a lot more like, probably a good 80 out of 100 will stop and look at this. So that's what we're going for. making it more interesting, more enticing to those people that are just kind of casually interested. And what are ways that we can kind of captivate the general public a little bit more? I guess you could look at it that way. All right, so that is pretty much all I have for today. And we could do is just do kind of a Q&A if you guys have any questions, if you want to let me know anything that you want to talk more about that I covered today, or we'll be going over, like I say, the details of this project tomorrow. And I'll actually put together some version of this on my own. It won't look probably anything like these, but it'll be dealing with that same, it'll be dealing with, how do we make this more enticing to read? Again, you got to get all of this information on here somehow. There's things within this that we can simplify as well, like I was mentioning, titles and some of this stuff in here. If you want to simplify, you'll see me do that tomorrow, but you got to get the majority of it. You got to get the gist of what's happening here from this sheet and actually include it on your project. So I mentioned not including the assessment data. If you got images from the internet, we're supposed to cite the sources and all that. I think, for example, it was brought up to do a card or something like that, and you want to keep that nice. That would make sense to want to keep that piece nice. So we don't have to do that. You can enter that in the, when you submit it to Dropbox in the comment area. That's fine. But on this, you actually do have to have all of this stuff in here, the notes. Remember to keep that in there. That's something that we, if this was a task that was assigned to us as graphic designers, we'd have to use this data down here. So you got to figure out a place where this goes. It's usually at the bottom. You could run it along the side if you wanted, but that would, if it's a poster, it's going to be kind of hard to read. So I think it's worst case scenario. It depends on how you have your design going, but I think probably in most cases, you're going to run it along the bottom. I guess you could run along the side and do it vertically oriented, but probably best if it's done like this. Not necessarily, but probably in most cases, it's kind of the ordinary way to do it, but just make sure that you remember to have this information on there. And I think that is about it. I don't really have any other things to mention at this time that I can think of. So one comment is, so you'd get rid of the background on this? I think the background's good. I like the background. I mean, that's, again, a judgment call. I'm not saying it's right. You could get rid of the background on this. But I kind of like it, especially because there's a good tie-in to the world and to have these continents. But, it's a judgment call. You don't have to have the background if you didn't want to. We've also got the world represented here. So the continents are more or less represented here, and that might be enough. I kind of like that background. I like what they did, but you're right. It wouldn't have to be there. And if you wanted it to be less busy, as you're saying, yeah, I mean, I think that you're right. It would make it slightly less busy. And that is one of the problems with this one. Although I like it, it is a little bit busy. That was one of the challenges I think that they had. And I think one of the things that could solve that, the background might help with that. I would keep the background and just run the alignment so that's all left. I might shrink some of these things. I would maybe not use these people icons, or at least use them smaller in a different way. So there's other things besides getting rid of the background that you could do, but you could certainly also get rid of the background with wood. kind of make it look less busy. So I think you're right. Yeah. So yeah, simplifying the icons, taking the date out and just the year, statistics from June. Yeah, definitely. Or even if it was all numbers. Statistics from 2012. And, I guess it's down here. So statistics are for June 30th, 2012. Yeah, do we need that in the title? That's a good point. Brianne just mentions that. How can you simplify it on the actual place? Well, yeah, there's no reason to mention it. Or, that's a toss-up. Do you really want to mention it? I think, again, I want you guys to consider that. It could be interesting. Well, when is this from? Well, that's something that I would typically look at a poster like this, and I'd look at it down here, and I'd look at the small print. When are these statistics from? Oh, right here. That's what would occur to me. This isn't necessarily, this doesn't reel me in. But Brianne mentioned just putting 2012 might be enough up here. Population statistics for 2012. So I think you're right. I think that would be another good example of simplifying it. You're right. Making the world a solid circle instead of having the continents repeated. Yeah, or one or the other. I think, we're talking about before, do we delete this background? Well, if we deleted this background with the map, the continents here, then the world continents would be just fine. But if we got rid of the continents on this circle area, the world here, we could keep this background. So yeah, it's a little bit, I think they went a little bit overboard with the repetition. That would be one comment I would have on this project. I think, and I already mentioned it before, definitely see a little bit too many of those computer monitor icons. And, those are good things to notice because, other people walking by our poster are going to kind of see that. It's going to be like, well, that looks kind of weird. We don't want them saying that. So we want them to kind of be taken in by this, want to make them interested, not picking it apart and saying, what are all those crazy computer things going on, those crazy. So too much repetition, you can always have too much anything. Okay, a few more comments here. Under the continents with December 31st. It's just the year 2000. Not sure what you mean. Asia on here. Oh, right. Repeated. Okay, I see what you're saying. So it shows it over and over and over again. Sure. Which would, yeah. So comment in the chat, is this being repeated over and over and over? Whereas if it just said 2012, population statistics, you could put a semicolon 2012, and that would just take care of this. We could get rid of this. It's already down here, as we talked about. So it wouldn't be this there. And then we get rid of all these repeated lines here. So maybe we want to stay here. but maybe we don't need December 31st on every single line. Maybe December 31st could be down here. So typically you're not going to change this, but you could add to it. You could just take things like that out just to simplify it. I think the exact date might be important, but again, that's definitely making that line run into this. It's making it look more busy, as we're talking about. Busyness is one of those things that does not attract positive attention. So those simplified little bits and pieces that we can put in here, every bit counts. So yeah, just a lot of comments going on about people noticing some of these different things that can be edited, modified, or kind of treated, handled a little bit differently. If it's information that we need, might we be able to put it down here instead of repeating it every single time? I mean, there's always a better way if you're, they call it the dry method, don't repeat yourself in programming. So, if you're repeating yourself a little too often, figure out a way that you could not do that so much. Definitely. So good conversation going here. Yeah, and repetition is just a balance. It's just, you want some degree of it, but you don't want too much of it. It's like with anything. A little bit of repetition is a good thing. It'll get your attention in a good way. It's a major design principle, CRAP, that we're so fond of saying. You hear it often. Contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity, and how that works on your layout. It's great to consider that every single time. Take a step back and consider those principles and how you can improve in each one of those, but also think about what's being overused. Repetition, without a doubt, in many ways is being overused in this piece. So I'm trying to kind of point out what are ways we could kind of pull back on some of that repetition. And, if you want to go by that dry method, that's something that programmers talk about. Do not repeat yourself. Don't repeat yourself. Dry, D-R-Y. And it's kind of applicable here. Like where can we simplify? Do not repeat yourself. If you're saying the exact same date, that's making it really long on every single line. How can we kind of figure out a way to not do that? So one thing would be stats are from, if it isn't already down here, we could put a line in here and just say, these two dates, or maybe get rid of 2012 if we had 2012 up here. And then, just that would give us enough indication. 2,000 internet users. So yeah, I mean, things that you can simplify, definitely look for on this piece. I didn't mark her down for any of this stuff, but she did lose a few points for some of the stuff I mentioned. Still though, again, this project did well. And I thought they did a decent job of the presentation. Even though we're talking about many things that could improve, it's good to kind of talk about those things and point those out, I think. All right, well, I think I'm going to wrap it up for today, and tomorrow we're going to pick this up, and I'll actually be putting together the assessment and the assignment. So you'll see a version of how I kind of work through this. And again, use these projects and what I do more as inspiration and an example for tomorrow. I might even say this again, but I don't want you to just copy what I'm doing. Obviously you can, and you get some credit for that, but you're not going to get 100% if you're just copying, making something look really identical to mine, because That's not quite the idea. It's more thinking through things and thinking about how you would present them. And, I'm sure most of you will do that anyways, but it always seems like one or two people want to copy exactly what I'm doing. That's definitely not what I'm after. So anyhow, uh, good session, good class. Glad to have you. And thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place. All right. Have a good day. See ya.